Hi everyone. This is the very first video on my YouTube channel where I'll be sharing the story of my life, from being born in Vietnam, adopted and raised in Belgium, to the reason why I decided to return to my homeland after nearly 30 years. From now on, I'll be sharing my most honest and personal experiences living day to day in Vietnam, a country that feels both unfamiliar and deeply familiar, and the place I've chosen to begin a new chapter of my life. If you're curious about Vietnam, planning to travel here, or simply want to understand more about the culture and people through the eyes of someone who has come home, then don't forget to subscribe and join me on this journey. Because this isn't just about a country. It's a journey back to myself. Hello everyone. My name is Fletcher E. Robinson, but perhaps that name doesn't tell the whole story of who I truly am. Somewhere deep in my heart, I've always known that there's another name, another origin, a past that was never clearly spoken. That name is Nguyen, the name I was given at birth in Vietnam, where I was born in 1995. I was born into a poor family in a northern province of Vietnam. Back then, it was still called Vinh Phu. I was the sixth child in a large family, with 3 older brothers and 2 older sisters. My birth parents, overwhelmed by hardship, couldn't afford to raise another child. I was just a newborn, only a few months old, when they made the heartbreaking decision to place me in an orphanage. By some incredible twist of fate, my life took a different path, a path that millions of other orphans might never have. My adoptive parents, a kind couple from Belgium who were living and working in Vietnam at the time, learned about the orphanage through a Vietnamese friend. They couldn't have children of their own. And when they saw me, a tiny baby with wide, quiet eyes among the cries in the nursery, they said, "We knew, this is our child." When I was 10 months old, they completed the adoption and brought me back to Belgium. I grew up there in a warm, loving, and stable home. My adoptive parents ran a small restaurant, working hard to give me the best life they could. They never made me feel out of place or different. I grew up as a Belgian child, until one day, I started asking questions. Why don't I look like them? Why is my skin darker, my eyes black, and my hair thick and deep brown? Those questions opened the door to something much bigger, a journey of return, of rediscovery, of finding my roots. And today, I am here, in Vietnam, the country where I was born, to share the story with you. This is the very first video in a series documenting my journey to explore the land I never truly knew, but have always felt deeply connected to in my heart. Thank you for listening. This journey means everything to me, and I hope you'll walk it with me. I have no memories of the first months of my life, which may not be so different from many people. But what is different, is this: I have no photos from that time, no little blanket my birth mother once wrapped me in, no lullaby sung to me, no memory of our first embrace. All of those moments I've only heard about them through stories. Fragments, pieced together one by one, forming a picture of a childhood I never even knew existed. According to my adoptive parents, in 1995, I was born into a poor family in a small province in northern Vietnam. They already had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls, and when I arrived, the burden of yet another mouth to feed made life unbearable. My birth mother was weak and exhausted. My birth father had no stable job, just informal labor. Struggling with poverty, they felt they had no choice but to bring me to a nearby orphanage. I was one of many babies left behind, no documents, no promises, no guaranteed future. But then, something extraordinary happened. A Belgian couple, who would later become my adoptive parents, were living and working in Vietnam at the time. They were based in Hanoi and had been involved in charity work at orphanages. Unable to have children of their own, they were told by a Vietnamese friend that it might be possible to adopt a child from a center nearby. So, they visited the orphanage, and among countless babies, they stopped at the tiny crib where I was lying. My father would later tell me that I was very small, thin, and frail. But when he looked at me, I opened my eyes and stared back, not crying, not afraid. In that instant, something stirred in his heart. "She's not a stranger's child," he said to his wife. "This is our son." Adopting a child in Vietnam at that time wasn't easy. There were endless documents to file, birth certificates, passports, medical exams. But they did it all. By the time I was 10 months old, they had completed every legal step. I was officially adopted, held in my mother's arms, and taken to Belgium, a country that would be my home for nearly 3 decades. I don't remember that day. But now that I know the story, I often wonder, what if they hadn't visited the orphanage that day? What if they had chosen a different child? Then perhaps I, Nguyen, would have remained just a forgotten name in the files of a Vietnamese orphanage. But fate had other plans. And that turning point, just 3 months old, lying in a crib in Vietnam, would change the entire course of my life. I grew up in Belgium, a peaceful, modern, and deeply compassionate country. A place with clear blue skies, clean streets, snowy white winters, and vibrant summers full of flowers. That was the place I called home for more than 25 years of my life. But more importantly, it was where I had a happy, fulfilling childhood, surrounded by unconditional love. My adoptive parents, two kind-hearted, hard-working Belgians, ran a small restaurant in the city. Every day, they worked from morning until night, not only to make a living, but to give me the best life they could. Even though they weren't my biological parents, I never once felt different throughout my childhood. They loved me as if I were their own. I was called Daddy's little boy and the light of Mommy's life. Every night, no matter how busy she was, my mom would come into my room to kiss me goodnight. Warm hugs, home-cooked meals, afternoons at the park or the zoo, the first day of kindergarten, all these are sweet memories etched deeply into my heart to this day. I remember, when I was little, my classmates started to get curious. Some would ask bluntly, "Why is your skin darker than ours? Are you Asian? Were you adopted?" Those questions came and went like a breeze. At the time, I would innocently ask my adoptive parents, "Am I your real son?" And they would always smile gently, stroke my head, and say, "You are our son. You are the most precious gift we've ever received." And I believed them. Truly. I grew up just like any other child, speaking French and Dutch, watching cartoons, playing in the backyard, celebrating warm Christmases with family, being taught kindness, and learning how to love others. If no one had ever told me, I might never have known that I was adopted. Life in Belgium felt like a long, gentle dream, filled with love. Until one day, something happened, an event that made me stop and look inward for the first time, to question my origins. And begin the journey to rediscover where I truly came from. But that's a story for the next chapter. Life drifted on gently, peacefully. I grew up, went to school, made friends, and eventually entered university. Still the same Asian boy in a European country, but I never felt out of place, because my family was always the firm foundation beneath my feet. However, as I got older, I began to sense that something was different. When I looked in the mirror, my golden brown skin, deep black eyes, thick dark hair, it was clear I didn't resemble the typical Belgian. The questions I had once asked as a child slowly returned, more vivid and persistent this time. I asked my adoptive mother again, "Mom, am I really your biological son?" But she would only smile gently, stroke my head like she did when I was little, and say, "You are my son." To me, that's all that matters. I didn't ask again. Partly because I didn't want to hurt them. And partly because, deep down, I wasn't sure I was ready to face the truth, especially if that truth was something entirely different. Then one day, when I was 22, my adoptive father was diagnosed with a serious illness. He declined rapidly. And within months, the strong, cheerful man I had known all my life was lying quietly in a hospital bed. That day, I sat beside him, holding his hand. He looked at me differently, not just as a father shielding his son, but as someone preparing to share something important. And then he whispered, "Fletcher Robinson. I'm sorry we didn't tell you earlier. You are not our biological child. You were born in Vietnam and adopted when you were just 3 months old. Your birth parents, they were very poor. They left you at an orphanage because they couldn't afford to raise you." I froze. The world seemed to stop. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I just felt empty. A part of me had suspected this, but hearing it from my father shattered something deep inside, splintering into 1,000 pieces. He squeezed my hand tighter. "We've loved you as if you were our own flesh and blood. But I believe you deserve to know the truth. I've kept every document, every piece of information in case, one day, you want to find your roots. It's all there." That night, for the first time, I held in my hands the documents that revealed my birth name. Nguyen. A name that felt foreign, yet strangely familiar. A name that felt like the first wave crashing into my heart, awakening a deep longing to uncover my origin. From that moment on, I knew I could no longer live as I had before. I needed to understand who I truly was. I needed to know the people who brought me into this world, who they were, how they lived. And no matter how difficult it might be, I knew I had to begin the journey back. After discovering the truth about my origins, it felt like I had stepped into a whole new world, one where I was both the main character and an outsider watching my own life unfold. My name is Nguyen. I was born in Vietnam. I had another family, halfway across the world. In the nights that followed, I would sit quietly in my room, reading and rereading the file my adoptive father had left for me. Each line, each name, each scribbled Vietnamese address made my heart race with anticipation and confusion. I didn't speak Vietnamese. All I had were a few fragments of information: the place I was born, my birth parents' names, and the name of the orphanage in Vietnam. I started searching on Google, looking up every detail. I typed in orphanage in Vinh Phu province, 1995. But most of the results were vague. Perhaps because Vinh Phu later split into two provinces, Vinh Phu and Phu Tho. Perhaps the orphanage no longer existed, or had changed names. I tried emailing several government agencies in Vietnam, but received no reply. I wrote in English, attached all my documents, but it seemed no one really understood what I was trying to do. Many times, I felt like giving up. And every time I looked at my old birth certificate, it felt like a part of me was being abandoned all over again. 3 years passed since the day I learned the truth. The longing remained, but I had almost accepted the idea that I might never find my biological family. Then, one fateful day, I met someone new, a Vietnamese student studying abroad in Belgium. As I told him my story, he looked at me for a long time and said, "I'll help you find your family. We Vietnamese are deeply connected to one another. Just trust me." I hesitated. But then I looked into his sincere eyes, and there it was again, a flicker of hope. I gave him everything I had: my birth name, the names of my birth parents, my birth year, and the name of the province, Vinh Phu. And from that very moment, a new kind of search began. Not through Google. Not through emails. But through the hearts of the Vietnamese people. Social media, community groups, a sense of shared roots, things that once felt distant suddenly became the threads connecting me back to where I came from. I never imagined that, just 3 months later, something miraculous would happen. 3 months after my Vietnamese friend began sharing my story on social media, one evening, I received a message from him. "Nam, I found your family." I froze. My heart started racing. Every word felt like it seeped into my veins, making me tremble with a rush of emotion. He sent me a photo of an older woman, thin, with sun-darkened skin and eyes filled with sorrow. I stared at the picture for a long time. I couldn't explain it, but she looked strangely familiar, like someone I had seen in a dream. She was my birth mother. My friend told me that the place I was born used to be part of Vinh Phu province, which later split into Phu Tho and Vinh Phu. My family lived in a small village along the Red River. My father had passed away. An older brother, born in 1993, had also died in a drowning accident. Now, only my mother and 4 siblings remained, 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters, all married with families of their own. They lived simple, modest lives, but their bond was full of deep, unwavering love. I wanted to book a flight immediately. But at that time, my adoptive father was still gravely ill. I couldn't leave him. I put everything on hold and stayed by his side until he passed away in 2022. In early 2023, my adoptive mother said something that brought me to tears. "Go to Vietnam. Visit your birth family. I'll go with you." In February 2023, I landed at Noi Bai Airport for the first time in my life. It wasn't just a flight, it was a homecoming after nearly 3 decades of separation. As I stepped out of the airport doors, I saw over 20 people waiting. They were holding a big sign that read, "Welcome home, Quang Nam." I stood frozen. In the crowd, an elderly woman broke into tears and ran toward me. She grabbed my hand, tears streaming down her face. Through sobs, she cried out, "Nam, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I wrapped my arms around her. My heart burst open. Everyone around us, family and strangers alike, had tears in their eyes. Some took out their phones to record. Others couldn't hold back their own sobs. I had never witnessed such a powerful moment. A mother who lost a son for 28 years. A son who had grown up half a world away. And now, finally, they were in each other's arms again. No words were needed. Just a hug, a look, a tear, that was enough for me to know. I was home. From Noi Bai Airport, my adoptive mother, my birth family, and I traveled to my hometown, a small rural district in Pudong province, where the Red River has quietly flowed for generations. The drive took over 2 hours, but it felt like just a blink of an eye. I stayed silent the whole ride, gazing out the window. Everything looked unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting: endless green rice fields, red-tiled rooftops, motorbikes carrying 3 or 4 people rushing by like the wind. When the car stopped, I saw a small old house with moss-covered brick walls and a faded tile roof, nestled behind clusters of bamboo and a narrow red dirt path. My mother softly said, "This is your home, Nom." I stepped out of the car, my shoes instantly covered in mud, but I didn't care. My heart pounded. A group of people, relatives, uncles, aunts, siblings, were already waiting. They ran toward me, wrapping me in hugs. Everyone was smiling, crying. No one saw me as a stranger. They all called out with warmth and love. "Nom oi. Little brother. My dear nephew. You're finally home." The house had only 2 rooms, a low roof, and a cement floor, but it had been cleaned thoroughly. Lanterns and flags were hung up, and a big meal was prepared. My first meal in Vietnam was a simple feast, but it warmed me deeply: boiled chicken, fried spring rolls, vegetable soup, fragrant white rice. I had never had a meal that tasted so good. Not because of the food, but because of the love. After dinner, everyone invited me to sing karaoke. A portable speaker was set up in the middle of the yard. Music played, and one by one, they sang songs of the homeland. I didn't understand the lyrics, but the melody stirred my soul. My mother held the microphone too, singing and crying at the same time. She sang for the son she lost 28 years ago. That night, I slept on an old bamboo bed in my mother's small room. There was no air conditioning, no soft mattress, yet I slept more soundly than ever before. Before closing my eyes, I looked up at the ceiling, listened to the crickets chirping outside, and thought to myself, "This is my true homeland. This is my blood and flesh." I was no longer Fletcher, the Belgian boy with Vietnamese blood. I was Nguyen Quang Nom, a son returned from afar. I stayed in my hometown for 2 months. And truly, that time changed me in ways I never imagined. Before, I had only known Vietnam through books, the internet, or the stories of a few Vietnamese friends. But now, I was living it, touching, breathing, and becoming one with the very place I was born. Every morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. with my mother and older brother. Here, people lived by the rhythm of the sun. As soon as dawn broke, the sound of roosters echoed across the village. My mother lit the wood stove to cook rice, while my brother rode his bicycle to the market to buy a bundle of vegetables and a few grams of meat. I followed him, my feet muddy, breathing in the scent of early morning dew mixed with smoke from cooking fires, things I never imagined I'd grow to love. Everyone in the village knew me as the long-lost son who returned. They greeted me warmly, with kind smiles and open hearts. Some afternoons, I was taken to visit each relative's home. They brought out old photographs and told me stories of how hard my parents had worked, how I had been taken away from the orphanage, and how, over the years, they would still mention me at family meals, as if I had never truly left. I learned how to greet people in Vietnamese, how to fold my hands in respect before elders, how to sit around a shared meal without forks or knives, just chopsticks and a bowl of white rice. I learned how to bow in gratitude, how to address someone as Chu, uncle, T, aunt, BAC, elder, or Co, auntie, depending on their place in the family. At first, it seemed complicated. But gradually, I understood, in those words and titles was a whole cultural system built on family, respect, and harmony. I also began to feel the deep bond between the people here. They lived with sincerity and closeness. One day, when it rained heavily and the roof started leaking, our neighbors rushed over to help my mother cover it with a tarp. Another time, when my brother got sick, a neighbor brought over hot porridge without being asked. There were no polite formalities. They just acted, because to them, we were all family. For me, someone raised in a Western society that values individualism, it was truly moving. I realized that even if they lacked material wealth, Vietnamese people possess something incredibly precious: human warmth. And perhaps because of that, within just a few weeks, I no longer felt like a foreigner. I had become part of the village, part of the home, part of the river, part of the breath of this homeland. After 2 months in Phu though, the day came for me to return to Belgium. The feeling of leaving a place I had only just reconnected with was hard to describe, like having to say goodbye to a beautiful dream you're not ready to wake up from. On the way to the airport, my birth mother held my hand tightly. She didn't say a word, just sat in silence. Her eyes were red. My older brother sat in the back seat, also quiet, watching me through the rearview mirror. I felt like a child once again, about to leave the embrace of family after being lost for so many years. My mother handed me a small bag. Inside was an old handkerchief, a few faded photographs, and a handwritten note from my birth father on the day I was born. He had named me Nguyen, a name I had carried in my heart ever since I learned the truth. The flight left Hanoi on a rainy night. Looking down at the glimmering lights below, I asked myself, when will I return to this place, the place where, for the first time, I truly felt like myself? Back in Belgium, I walked into the familiar house where I had grown up, studied, and become the person I am today. But this time, something was different. Everything looked the same, but my heart had changed. I felt as though I now carried two worlds inside me. One half was Fletcher, the independent, modern Belgian man. The other half was Nguyen, a son of Vietnam, filled with memories of the river, the small house, my mother's voice, and the language of my homeland. I started spending more time talking with my adoptive mother, the woman who had always supported me in my search for my roots. We looked through the photos from Phu Tho together, recalling those simple yet deeply loving moments. She said to me, "I am so happy you found a part of yourself you never knew was missing." I regularly texted and video called my birth mother and siblings in Vietnam. They also sent me photos of their daily life, planting rice in the fields, family meals, the laughter of children. Even from afar, I felt like I was living with them, day by day. Some nights, I dreamed I was sitting on the porch, watching the Red River flow silently by. My mother would call out, "Nom oi, come eat, my child." And I'd wake up with tears soaking my pillow. It was then I realized, no matter where I live, my heart will forever belong to the place where I was born, Vietnam. In 2024, after many sleepless nights, I made the decision to return to Vietnam. This time, it wasn't just a short visit, it was a long journey. A journey to live, to understand, and to truly immerse myself in the place where I was born. My adoptive mother was the first to support that decision. She said, "You need to live the life that feels true to your heart. No matter where you are, I'll always be watching over you." I resigned from my job in Belgium, packed my things, and booked a one-way ticket to Hanoi. In my suitcase were just a few sets of clothes, a journal to document my journey, and a photo of me with my birth mother from our first meeting. This time, I felt no fear, no longer lost in the question of who am I. I knew now that I was Fletcher, but also Quang. I carried within me two heritages, two cultures, and I was proud of that. I rented a small apartment in Hanoi and moved in with some cousins. I started learning Vietnamese more seriously. Every day, I went out into the streets, to sidewalk cafes, eating banh cho, sipping iced tea, talking with locals. I wanted to understand the Vietnamese people not just with my mind, but with my heart and real experiences. I also began filming videos, capturing each step of my journey as a way to preserve it, and to share it with others like me. Mixed-race children, adoptees, and anyone searching for their roots. The first YouTube channel I created was called Nom Returns. In it, I told my story with complete honesty, no drama, no script. I filmed early mornings at the countryside market, family meals with my birth mother, nighttime walks around the lake, and the laughter of neighborhood kids. And most importantly, I no longer had to hide who I was. I didn't have to choose between being Belgian or Vietnamese. I was simply me, with all the pieces that made me whole. Vietnam, once a distant land, had now become my second home. I knew there were still many things I didn't fully understand, many places I hadn't been, and many people I hadn't met. But that's what made this journey meaningful. And I hope that you, whether in Vietnam or anywhere in the world, would walk alongside me through every step, every story. Because this isn't just a journey back to my roots. It's a journey back to myself.